Loveland Magazine TV videos are brought to you by the generous support of MoveToLoveland.com.
We get started with introductions. My name is Andrew Setters. I'm the Director of Communication Community Engagement for Loveland City School District. We have our Superintendent, Mike Broadwater, here. You'll hear from him in a minute. Our Treasurer, John Espy. Also want to introduce some of our board members who are in the room. We've got Christina Jernick in the back of the room, Lynn Mangan, and Reverend Jonathan Eilert, who is our board president, who is over there getting more chairs for people because he's that kind of guy. So this is our rough agenda for tonight. We'll have plenty of opportunity for us to have conversations and ask some questions, but we've got a lot of information we want to share with you also. We get into kind of what we've been doing over the past few weeks, talking about the state budget and getting in touch with state lawmakers. Where we are now, the budget goes through a process over the course of several months, so we'll update you on that and what comes next, and then get into a question and answer period. And if there's information or questions that are urgent as we're going through this, raise your hand. We'll try to answer them as we kind of go, but we've got a lot of information that we want to throw at you, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Mike Broadwater as soon as John Espy fixes the clicker.
Evening, everybody. I'm Mike Broadwater. I'm the superintendent for Loveland City Schools. This is my 4th year. I consider myself very blessed to be part of the Loveland City School District. 4 years ago, we started what we called a strategic vision. When I got here, the community and the schools, it was a little bit of flux, right? So we wanted a strategic vision, where we headed with everything. And part of the strategic vision that we had, as we went through it, we had 4 different goals. One of the goals was fiscal, and I'm going to try and go through my slides quick enough that we can get to the treasurer, John, who's going to talk about the meats of it. But in our strategic vision, we had 2 goals under fiscal responsibility. One was community engagement. This is it, right? We have a community advisory team that we've met 4 times this year. We have a town hall. We try and get out and talk to people as much as we possibly can. And the big thing about school funding is we're trying to advocate for solutions to our unique state funding challenges. And we'll go over why it's a little unique, but it's unique in many ways in that we are what I would call a bedroom community, so we don't have a whole lot of business helping us out with property tax. When you look at Loveland in the state of Ohio, they would consider us a wealthier district, which means they are setting us less money than some other districts. And so we have some unique challenges in Loveland that what we're really trying to do is educate our public, our community, that when a school district needs additional revenue, the only way we get that is through what's called a levy. And sometimes when people hear a levy, they think, somebody's mismanaged money. So what we've tried to do over the 4 years is educate our community as to why the state of Ohio is set up that way and why that's kind of what the routine is here in Loveland. And so we may or may not like it, but that's where we are. So what we started with, in addition to some of the other things, part of our community engagement, we asked for volunteers for a state funding committee last year. So the Board of Education charged John and I with coming up with a way to educate our community. And it's a lot easier to educate when you're not asking for money, where emotions get in the way, versus now, where we can have a conversation, right? And so the conversation is, as we look at state funding, we have a lot of assumptions where now all of a sudden House Bill 96 with Governor DeWine and now through the House bill, and we'll let John explain a little bit more, the rules of the game have changed a little bit, and that makes it hard for us to forecast, makes us hard to be predictable about what we're going to do. And so we're really working on how do we educate the community, how do we advocate for Loveland, we being all of us, right? Myself, John, but also the larger community. The state legislators that you have on our website, if you go under lobbying, it'll show you all the state legislators, not just for us, but also the education committee, funding committee, different committees that are on there. We invited all of the legislators that represent Loveland tonight to show up, and so far nobody has taken us up on coming this evening, and that's okay, they're busy. But we did make sure that we reached out to the legislators so that if they had an interest in hearing what we had to say, they could be here. So the State Funding Committee, we had about 50 individuals that signed up. We met 3 times last year. We went over kind of the first meeting I would go over expenditures. What do we expend on? And then John would go over revenues, and then we could go over the funding. But really, what we're trying to make sure that everybody understands, we keep an eye on expenditures. Revenues are difficult because revenues mean what? It's either a levy or state funding or federal funding. That's how you get funding. And funding can be a little bit difficult. So we like to say that it's not an expenditure problem, it's a revenue problem every now and then. So we did a deep dive into quite a few things related to the state funding. Like we said, this is a state funding issue, not a spending issue, and I'll go on a little bit more. We will have at the end time for questions. I'm trying to get through it quick enough. If you live in Loveland, you probably got this in your mailbox. What I want to do is start from the bottom. And what we have in Loveland, when I would go out for the last levy and talk in driveways and backyards, it's pretty easy because we have a lot of good data. We have a lot of good information. There's really nothing that we shouldn't be proud of. So the bottom, $15,420, is the expenditures per pupil. That is 55% of the districts in the state of Ohio spend more than we do per pupil, 55%. So we're the bottom 45% in expenditures per pupil. The next one is 20.4 to 1. That is student to teacher ratio. I think most people probably would be surprised. 97% of the districts in the state of Ohio have more teachers per student than we do. So we're in the bottom 3%. So if you say, well, don't ask for revenue, just make some cuts in expenditures, I don't think we want to get to the worst. We're the bottom 3% when it comes to teachers per student, and our teachers do a fantastic job, but that's pretty tough. When you look at administrators, sometimes people will say, well, you got too many administrators. Let's see what you can do with that. 144 to 1, 75% of the school districts in the state of Ohio have more administrators per pupil than we do. So we're in the bottom 25% of that. And so those two data points alone, I believe, shows we've adjusted to enrollment. We're not overstaffed, we've adjusted to enrollment. The one in orange there, $4,250, is how much we receive from the state per student. 85% of the school districts in the state of Ohio receive more. We're the bottom 15% in state funding. Do you know how many public school districts are in the state of Ohio?
660.
Yeah, 600, depending, 606, 607, depending on the data point that they pull up. Very good. I don't have a prize, but that's good. So we're in the bottom 15% when it comes to state funding per pupil. And if you don't know, the Constitution says it is a state responsibility to fund public schools. The state of Ohio is 45th out of 50th when it comes to state support for public education. And we're the bottom 15% of that. So that means we're pretty low, right? So then the last thing we have there, the 5 stars in every category, we're very proud of that. Obviously, that's the academics. 3% of the districts receive 5 stars, and we're one of those. 97% of the districts in the state of Ohio did not receive a perfect 5-star report card. So when I look at that, when I say we have good data, what that tells me is I think we get a pretty good bang for our buck. All right, if you look at what we do for our kids, and our staff does a great job, but we keep an eye on the expenditures, which we can control. Revenues, right now, we feel like that's the tough part. So when we asked our community to advocate for solutions, we have talked to similar districts across Ohio. There are about 50 to 55 districts that sit in the same boat that we do, and we talked to all of those. We talked to the superintendents, treasurers, and went through some of the difficult tasks that we have together. We work with statewide lobbying groups. I have a state superintendent's organization. John has a state treasurer organization. We're in what's called the Alliance, which is high-performing districts in the state of Ohio are together. And then there's also a fair school funding committee. And I can tell you, as we had discussions with some of these groups, they were not real excited about us pushing a little bit on the state funding, because you will see some districts are pretty happy with state funding. Some districts are not. We're not. We don't receive what we would consider our fair share, and we're in the point right now where we might be even losing more. The spring of 24 last year, we went up. It was Reverend Eilert, we had Lynn Mangan, John, Andrew, myself, went up and spoke with our legislators in Columbus after a committee meeting and had discussions with them then. In 2025, John and I both turned in written testimony about why we think Governor DeWine's bill would be difficult for Loveland. John went up and testified in person and did a great job. And so I can tell you the people in Columbus know Loveland. They've heard Loveland. The community at large has done a great job of sending information to their legislators. If there's a district in the state of Ohio that's done, I would think, a lot of work, probably more so than other districts, I would consider us to be in the top there. We've done a lot. This year, spring of 25, we went up again and met with some of our lawmakers. We met with Representative Schmidt, we have Senator Blessing, Senator Johnson, Representative Brownlee, Representative Teska, that is her aide, and then Representative Byrd. So we were up in Columbus having good discussions, but making sure that we're getting across what the issue is with Loveland. I'm going to let John kind of dig into that. So our 3 funding requests, number 1 was protect the guarantee, and I'll let John discuss what the guarantee is. That's our number 1 ask. We have to protect the guarantee. We do not fit on the Fair School Funding Plan formula. Therefore, they've developed what's called a guarantee. We are on that because we don't fit on the formula. Fully implement the Fair School Funding Plan and increase the state share minimum. Really, all of this, it would be great if the state of Ohio or whoever it may be could show that we need a little cost of living adjustment every year. That is the issue that we have in the state of Ohio. House Bill 920 took away, even when your appraisals go up, the funds we get revenue-wise do not. And so that's kind of a confusing piece that John will go over. So with that, what we had hoped for with our state funding committee is to get more state funding for Loveland City Schools. Where we are right now, we're fighting potentially devastating cuts from the state of Ohio. And also the federal government has kind of entered the picture as well. But we're going to focus on state funding. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John Espy, our treasurer.
Thank you. So I know that it can be difficult with education to know all the jargon. And I feel like there's another term that we have to learn every single day when it comes to education. So what I wanted to start with was key terms and do some explaining from the beginning. So the funding formula, it's basically a formula that the state uses to calculate how much each school district should get. And there's a lot of inputs that go into that. So over time, funding formulas had been found to be unconstitutional. That was the DeRolf case. And there were 4 DeRolf cases. And it basically said that school district income should not rely solely on property taxes. Because if you've been around the state of Ohio, there's a wide discrepancy in how much property value there is in each district. So the impetus to kind of correcting that was the Fair School Funding Plan. And that Fair School Funding Plan, which went into effect in 2021, was looking at additional inputs and looking at actual costs, which are called the base cost. And each district has its own base cost. It's the bare minimum that it takes to educate in that district. So if you were to go out and look at all the different districts, each district would have a separate base cost. And they put in all these really cool things with taking into account valuation, but not only valuation, looking at wealth of the district, also looking at funding special ed a little bit more. Unfortunately, when they ran the numbers, Loveland did not fall into this formula in an advantageous way. There were actually about 1/3 of the districts in the state that were not in a great place when it comes to funding. They were actually going to receive less funding on this formula. So what the state did is said, we're going to guarantee you back to the old formula. So you're not going to get any less money, you're just not going to get any new money. That's really what happened. When we look at a phase-in, there was a phase-in that was planned with the Fair School Funding Plan to be able to allow for percentage increases in 5 categorical areas. Gifted, career tech, special education, preschool special education, and then economic disadvantaged. So really, when we were asking for a phase-in or phase-in the Fair School Funding Plan, we were asking in this last biennium budget, this last 2 years, to get it fully funded. Now, why would we ask that if it's not helping us? It's because we believe in the formula itself. We believe that it can be changed and malleable more so than old formulas. But it was the next step to get us closer to being on that formula and getting additional funding. Okay? And again, a guaranteed district is a district that just doesn't fit into the formula, so we're guaranteed back on old funding. Strangely enough, the guarantee is not guaranteed any more than 2 years. It doesn't make sense, right? So last year, as Mike said, we were up in Columbus talking with lawmakers, and those lawmakers said, don't worry about the guarantee, that's not going away. And we were meeting with our school funding, our state funding committee, and as we were developing 3 things that we wanted for Loveland, what we said is we're going to pick some low-hanging fruit. We're going to say, protect the guarantee. Because it is low-hanging fruit at that time, but it was like to the tune of $7 million a year that we would lose if it went away. A lot of money. Okay, per year, over and over, $7 million less every year. So, we picked that as a group. And unfortunately this year with House Bill 96, one of the first things was reducing the guarantee. And let me tell you, when the guarantee starts to get reduced, it's going to continue to get reduced. Okay? So, taking a step back and just looking at the budget process. The governor's proposal came out at the very beginning of April. And then we both submitted written testimony. I believe Mrs. Mengen did as well. I went up and testified, and that's it's a nerve-wracking situation. But I can tell you, I felt so good afterwards because I knew I was advocating for everyone in this room, for the community, for my kids, for the students in this district. I mean, it was a great experience, but there were a lot of people that were doing that as well. Our professional organizations were doing that. So that was the Ohio House process. And the Ohio House last week passed a budget that now is going to the Ohio Senate. Then, likely, the Senate's going to change some stuff, and it's going to have to go to conference committee between the House and the Senate. They're going to have to agree, and before June 30th, there should be a final budget. So we're in this moment right now where these things are being decided, and we need to provide input on how we want it to be decided. So, taking a step back and looking at some specifics with House Bill 96, it includes phased-in reductions for districts on the funding guarantee. That's about 56% of districts in the state that are going to receive less money. It included a 5% reduction for us in fiscal year 26 and a 10% reduction in fiscal year 27. And when I held those two numbers and went out on the 5-year forecast, it was a reduction of $2.5 million. And that's assuming that in the next biennium they don't cut anymore. Okay? So it means that, again, in a state that's ranked 45th out of 50, in a district that is receiving in the bottom 15% of state funding, we were going to be cut. And I will tell you, and this is part of my testimony, there are some legislators that believe the guarantee is funding empty seats. Maybe in some districts they are, but we are below the state average in expenditures per pupil. We're in the top 3% of achieving districts. We're in the bottom 3% of teacher support in terms of how many students are with our teachers in terms of that ratio. When you look at a school district, we are a people business. We are working with people, and it takes a community. It takes our food service, it takes our office staff, it takes our custodians, It takes our teachers, it takes the aides, it takes the administrators too, believe it or not. We're not up here just playing solitaire all day. We work all day long. I promise you, I've worked in other districts. These people are the real deal. And I'm not just saying it because I work with them now. And we also challenge each other, which I think is really, 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 really great too. But I will tell you, we are not funding empty seats here. We're doing more with less every single day. And it's a challenge. When you look at this top line here, that is our 5-year forecast cash balance projection. So we had some issues already, right? The cash balance is going down. Part of the reason when we go back to the vision, which by the way, I was part of helping write as a community member. I didn't work here then, just a parent in the community, right? That's what I wanted to be on that, and I had no idea that I would end up working here. But when we sat down and crafted that, we were saying we need to find additional revenue somehow. So I've been working on writing grants. We've worked with the Loveland Schools Foundation to re-energize that group. And last night in LEPTA, I think I saw Kelly's here, we had a $30,000 donation from LEPTA last night. We had a $30,000 donation from Loveland City Schools. It's moving, it's right. I mean, the community cares, okay? So, but when you look at that top line, we still have issues. That was November. With the budget reductions, that cash balance drops. If you want to look at it, just the numbers, not a graphic, we all learn differently. $2.5 million effect on that cash balance over the 5-year forecast, and that's assuming that there's no additional reduction to the guarantee. So again, these were the things that we asked going into pre-House Bill 96. This is what you probably saw on the mailer if you got it at home. I see people taking pictures too. Take pictures all you want. We can put this on the website, so make it easier for you, but just letting you know. So when we look at those initial requests that we had, and what happens with that House budget bill, what was the response? Well, we made a lot of noise. And as Mr. Broadwater said, people know who Loveland is. I was in a room with a state rep who said, you don't have to convince me anymore. Go talk to other people. And I kept trying to give him the one-pager again, and he's like, I already got it. And so, but we made noise. So we got the protection of the guarantee. We did not get the fully implemented fair school funding plan, and we did not get the increase to state share that we were talking about. I want to also frame what that increase to state share would have done is if we went up 5%, we would have had $500,000 more per year. If we went up another 5% to 20%, we would have gotten an additional $1 million per year. We also don't know going forward what's going to happen in the Senate budget bill, what's going to happen in the final budget bill. We don't know. So that's, as you kind of see right there, but we still have work to do. We have to engage the Senate to make sure they know what we're asking for. So major House budget changes when you look at the House budget in comparison to House Bill 96. The guarantee remains, which is great. Actually give us a little bit of increase, 0.6%, 0.3% over the next 2 fiscal years, which equates to $75,000 year 1, $37,000 year 2. That's basically a teacher in the first 5 years with benefits. That's what 75 is, and half of that is the next year. They also instituted a cash balance provision. So what this says is that a district that has over 30% of cash balance when looking at the last year's expenditures would have their income reduced by the Budget Commission. So this we're opposed to, and I'll get into why we're opposed to it in a minute. We would be affected slightly by this. We're about 31.4% last year. Okay? I will also say that we passed a cash balance policy, or I shouldn't say we, the Board of Education did, passed a cash balance policy last year that basically put guardrails on when I have to come to them and ask them or let them know that we have a cash problem going forward, okay? Also moves from a 5-year forecast to a 3-year forecast. So I don't know many people that with data that goes out 5 years, why they would want to use 3. I actually would advocate for more. I actually typically look out more than 5 years. So when we look at the district's revenue and inflation, you'll see in 2025 we have 1.8%. Notice the inflation line up here at 2.3%. And then projected to go down in 26, 27, 28, and 29. Now, why would we have 1.8 and then drop? This year, the state gave us funds for science of reading stipends. Every teacher had to be trained in the science of reading, and so the state gave us funds. That affects our revenues. It makes the revenues go up, but it's a one-time fund, and it was restricted for something specific. Also, they gave us funds last year and into this year for high-quality education materials. Again, restricted. You had to use it for something specific, and it's one time. So that affects our revenues going up on one time. It also affects our expenditures going up in one time. So that's like it was a funded mandate, but it still affects our per pupil expenditures. So again, we're doing more with less because we have to spend more, and then we have to publish our per pupil expenditure amount, but we're told that we have to spend it. So that's part of that 1.8%. And I say this to say that clearly our revenues are not keeping up with inflation. So what are we asking for? What we're asking for right now is we're asking for continued protection of the guarantee. If it went away completely, we would lose $25 million over the current 5-year forecast. If it were to be back to House Bill 96 levels, we would lose $2.5 million. We want to ensure that state funding keeps pace with inflation. So we're asking for, get us closer to 2.3. You know, if you can't get us to 2.3, get us closer. Get us closer. If you can't get us there, get us closer. We're at 0.6 and 0.3. We need more. And finally, we want to remove the cash balance provision. I looked at every district in the state. We're in the bottom 22% of cash balance. And we want the state to fund a study on why cash balances might be high in districts. We also ask that the state not paint with a broad brush. When you look at borrowing money, if any district wanted to borrow money, if you had a cash balance of 30%, our Moody's rating would be lower than if we had a 50% cash balance or a 40%. And so there are some districts in the state that have high cash balances. One that I talked to their treasurer a couple days ago. It's high because they depended on tangible personal property taxes that have been phased out. So they're aware of it, the board's aware of it, the community's aware of it, everyone's okay with it. But now, painting with this broad brush of this cash balance provision, districts are going to be negatively affected. And so that's why we're asking for that to be removed. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew right now, who's going to go over the final kind of timeline, and then we'll get to questions here shortly.
Is everybody hanging in there? It's a lot. We tried to break it up so that it's easier to understand. The budget timeline, it's a long horizon, right? I think the governor's budget proposal came out in February. And as you see, the last step is June 30th it gets signed. It has to be signed by then. So, as John talked about, we're through the governor's proposal. It's gone through the House has approved theirs, and then we get into the Ohio Senate. There'll be hearings going on, public testimony, Senate budget bill approved maybe mid-June, And then if you go back to your, was it Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a bill, like they have a conference committee where they hash it out, and then it goes to the governor for a signature, the deadline of June 30th. So what we've done, and I hope the takeaway from this, if you take nothing else away from this tonight, is that our community has really told us, you guys have to fight for us with the state. When Mike was talking about the strategic vision, that was one of our biggest takeaways from that. And from conversations we had during levy campaigns, is people saying, you've got to fight for us with the state of Ohio. Because if you haven't put it together yet, if the state reduces money and the expenses stay the same, somebody else has to make it up, right? The math works out that it's going to be more of a reliance on local dollars. So we've kind of grabbed that and run with it and put together, tried to make it as simple as possible, a call for action. We have a page on our website there, and if you got the postcard about tonight, there's the website is on there as well, lovelandschools.org/lobby. What you're going to find on there is information about how you can call, email, and write a letter to your lawmakers. We're also going to have an updated flyer, and I'll pass this around. Just want to take one and pass it back. We've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to reach out to folks and say, hey, what's going on for Loveland? Is it something that we're on board with? We've tried to make it as clear as possible for folks to understand and as easy as possible for them to get the message to lawmakers. Like Mike and John talked about when we were up in Columbus a couple weeks ago talking to folks at the Ohio House, they were saying, oh yeah, I've seen that flyer. We were handing it to them. They've seen it because people on our state school funding committee and people in our community advisory team have already kind of jumped into action and been sending it to them. So our hope is that you take this and run with it. Go to the website. It's got a list of phone numbers, email addresses. Get this to the folks on the Senate Education Committee and the Senate Finance Committee and let them know that Loveland is paying attention to what they do, and if you share a consistent message with them, hopefully they'll get it. And what you'll see on that flyer is a little bit of a pivot from where we were just a few weeks ago before the House took action. And so these 3 bullet points are updated a little bit. We've got protect the guarantee, which has kind of stayed the same. It still remains probably the biggest priority because of the numbers that John talked about. And what, like John said just a moment ago, ensure the state funding keeps pace with inflation and remove that cash balance provision. So this sets us up for more long-term success. Like I said, folks have already heard from us during the House process. This is now mid-April, so we've got the rest of April and May and June that folks in the Senate need to keep hearing from our community so that they hopefully take action that doesn't roll back the amount of state funding that we get. Sound like a plan? All right. We threw a lot at you guys tonight. First of all, I just want to say thank you all for being here. We do town halls occasionally, and this is by far the biggest crowd we've had at one of them. And I'm glad to see that people are fired up around state funding. And we'll throw it out to you guys with questions because your head's probably swimming with a lot of stuff. We can jump back to slides, answer questions. Let us know what you got. Yes?
Yeah, this is not very informed, but I don't understand, are Ohio state revenues going down, or are there other priorities of getting a bigger share of the pie in education? Why is this happening?
So recently, Ohio.
$600 million for the Cleveland Browns. That's the priority. Take
Oh.
away from education.
Is it just the
Well,
professional, for the
let
billionaires?
me jump in there first. So the state taxes have been reduced.
That's the priority.
And when you reduce state taxes, you're reducing the pot of money. And then, so, yeah, there's always going to be additional, I mean, there are people testifying when I testified for their interests, right? Which is great. I mean, it's part of the democratic process. But, you know, it's a combination, I think, of people asking for additional That's an example, but that's a bond. It's structured a little bit differently. But I will say that there's a lot of different interests, and then the revenues are going down because of the reduction in the state tax.
But are other entities getting bigger a share of the pie? Is education in general in Ohio getting less of a share of the pie? The
My
pie is
understanding is
shrinking.
the total spending went up for education in this budget, correct?
But not at the same pace as it usually goes up.
Correct. So part of it was the phase-in was called for larger increases. And when you look at the 56% of districts were going to be reduced, take a guess of what districts near us were going to get an increase. Indian Hill was one.
Sycamore,
Sycamore,
Mason,
Mason.
Loveland. A little bit of an outlier there, but, so those three were getting more. But we're talking, and I'm here to talk about Loveland, but those three were getting more on House Bill 96. And so we met with multiple legislators. We sat down with Gene Schmidt, we sat down with Adam Byrd, who's not necessarily in our area, but he's in our area, but not in our, he's not one of our state reps. He actually texted me a little bit earlier. He wanted to come, but he couldn't. And he said he was fighting against the cash balance provision. He said he couldn't make any headway on it. I was like, well, we'll pick up the torch here and kind of fight against that. But so it's interesting that we have all these individuals that we sit down with, and a lot of times when we sit down, and we're not talking about just those two, but when we sit down, we hear a lot of interest about a lot of other places. I'm like, guys, we're talking about schools right now. We're talking about school funding. So our job is to advocate for school funding.
I think that if I were to throw in a difficult piece to it, when the state income tax is reduced, the population that I think it's really, really difficult for are our senior citizens, right? The fixed income people. And when you reduce state income tax, it sounds great, but then what's going to increase revenues at the local level, whether it be police, fire, schools, whatever? It's not going to be income tax, it's going to be local property tax. And the property tax, in my mind, is more difficult for senior citizens than an income tax if you're on a fixed income. So it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, whether if it's at the state level, to say that you're going to reduce state income tax and then say you don't have enough money, it's kind of artificial in a way. But what it does is pushes everything to the local. And the only avenue we have as a school district is property tax. And that's difficult on people that maybe their house they purchased for $200 and it's worth $500, but they're on a fixed income. And so that's the difficult part I think we have. And there's they're trying to find relief for senior citizens. The issue for schools would be when there is relief from property tax, we're getting less property tax. So that's where it starts to create this us versus them. And what we're trying to do is say it's not the schools versus the community, it's the schools and community against this state funding. And the federal funding is going to start rearing its ugly head too.
And I would like to say just one thing before we, I want to be very clear and go on the record saying this. Advocating and getting everything we want up here that we just showed you, it's not going to make levies go away. But I think it's going to make them more manageable. And that is our goal, is to make things more manageable. And we want to stretch them longer. We want to stretch them as long as we can. And we want to ask for as little as possible to just help us continue to do what we're doing. But the reality is, when I'm doing a forecast, it's really hard to do a May forecast when the budget's not going to be decided until June. And so I kind of spoke to Mike and even the board members that if something majorly changes material, I'll put another one out there. We want you to understand it's not going to be the thing that causes levies to go away. But again, we have to fight for every single dollar here for the school district.
All right, we've got another question over here.
How do vouchers work within the education budget? It seems like there's a pie of money, and is it extracted out of that same pie? And it seems like that's a real variable, right? Because it's like people can apply, I guess, you don't know the exact.
The short answer is great question, and they're not going away. And so we're trying to not concern too much with that versus just what we can get. But yes, that amount of money was taken from the pie for education. And so again, I'll say that.
It's a different slice of the pie of the state budget. It's not necessarily coming directly from us, but like if you
Right.
spend money over here, you don't have it to spend over here. So there's that, but it's not really something that we.
It's not like, hey, there was a fixed set of money for education, and oh, by the way, we're taking X% out for vouchers. You're saying, hey, it got cobbled up from the state
So with the
budget.
Fair School Funding Plan, it was actually tied in to where if funding was phased in with Fair School funding, that vouchers would also go up commensurate with that. Now that it's kind of a new formula, they didn't necessarily in the House budget bill get rid of the formula. It still exists, but there's language in there that says Ohio Department of Education and Workforce is forbidden to pay off of that formula. So they took basically what we were getting before and added that 0.6 and 0.3%, going away from that formula. And Andrew was talking earlier, the Fair School funding formula was really meant to be 50-50. 50% state, 50% local. And without those updates to the base costs that I talked about at the beginning, that didn't happen, then when those don't happen, that means that the property tax owners take on more of the brunt. So,
Do we have any more questions? Yes, sir.
Why does Ohio seem to value education as poorly as it does?
That is a fantastic
I mean,
question.
what's the root of this problem?
I don't know how to answer that, but I can tell you this, like, we sat in a room with legislators about a month ago, and in one of the discussions was, hey, we want to raise the max or the minimum number of hours that you have to go to, be in session. But in the same breath, talking about reductions of $2.5 million. I'm like, how do you think that we're going to get more hours out of our employees? Like, that's counterintuitive, right? So I don't know how to answer that question. I wish I could. That's probably if I had that answer.
Insight on that?
What's
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. It's a very good question. I think like John said, there are a lot of things that the state says we should do and must do when it comes to education. So I think they're focused on it. But do the dollars flow to back up and make those things happen from the state to us?
I would throw out, this is year 38 for me in education, and it's probably the most difficult time I've seen where it feels like public education, I'll even say it seems like we're under attack a little bit, and I don't know why. But what I think, John's mentioned it, and as much time as legislators spend on funding and a funding formula, I would rather, instead of painting with a broad brushstroke, look at each district and see what we're doing. We were in a meeting with Claremont County soups and treasurers, and I probably said something that they weren't happy with. But to me, if you look at education, how you should run it educationally, fiscally, I don't know how there's not a better model than the Loveland model. When you look at bottom 3% when it comes to teacher per kid, top 3% in academics, I don't know what more they want. And so to see that we're getting reductions is disheartening for kids, because what we certainly don't want to do is take something away from students. And I think the whole House Bill 920 we didn't really get into. People don't really understand when their reappraisals go up, they don't understand, well, the reappraisals went up, you're getting more taxes, what are we doing? We don't get that. The House Bill 920 levels that we don't get new revenue, right? We might get a little more inside millage. And so the question I always ask, let's say that we have, with our entire staff, $40 million in salaries, but forget about benefits. Benefits go up quicker than salaries. But if we say, do our employees, do they deserve a CPI, a cost of living adjustment every now and then? If we say yes, let's say 2%, Well, 2% on a $40 million salary is how much? That's $800,000, right? And if we do that in perpetuity, which we do, that's $800,000 one year, maybe $820 the next, and so forth, because the salaries are going up. And so, just bare bones, when you look at other companies, revenues have to go up based on inflation, or you start saying we got to slim some things down. And about 5 years ago, before I got here, the district cut 50 positions. That's why we're sitting in the bottom 3% when it comes to teachers per students. If we say, okay, we're not going to increase revenues, we're going to decrease expenditures, what's that mean? We'll have the worst teacher to student ratio in the state of Ohio. And I'm not trying to be dramatic about it, but we are pretty low. When you're in the bottom 3%, that's pretty low in the state of Ohio to be achieving what we achieve. And it's because the community supports us. Our kids are unbelievable. The families are unbelievable. And I'm getting long-winded because I'm a little frustrated, and it's a great question.
All right, next question. We've got one right here, Pat.
So you said that Sycamore and Indian Hill got an increase, and I consider them just as wealthy, if not wealthier, than Loveland. How did that
It's
happen?
because they weren't on the guarantee. The formula worked for them.
But they are receiving the school vouchers. It's just shifting taxpayer dollars.
I mean, it's part of the pie, right?
It's part of the whole
Yeah.
school budget.
Yeah.
All right, we got a question in the purple sweatshirt.
When I was looking on the website for the funding, with the revenues, I didn't see anything, unless I just missed it, for the federal funding, which you said that's a different, but that's coming up. So I only saw like local tax revenue and state funding.
It's almost as if we anticipated this question. All right.
So this is something I shared with the board last night. So we're hearing right now that the Department of Education and Workforce, Federal Department of Education, I should say, the Federal Department of Education is likely not going to be dissolved. However, there's going to be a lot of changes in how those funds are moved out. So what we're hearing right now, and this is not going to be solidified in probably until May, is that we're anticipating a reduction of $78,000 in Title I, which is 20%. Complete elimination of Title IIA, which again, it works on improvement of student achievement and its staff professional development. So we believe we have to invest in our staff to have the outcomes that we want to have that 5-star outcome. And then Title III, complete elimination. And this is probably one of the spots that's a challenge for us with our population. I'm writing grants for high dosage tutoring for our ELL population. And it's kind of like one step forward and 3 steps back. I was writing a grant for $55,000, and now we're going to have potentially 30,000 reduced. So it's a challenge. And I always think like opportunity cost. We can look at vouchers and look at the opportunity cost of where that could go, but I look at our time as opportunity cost. How many grants could I be working on if I wasn't fighting for the funding that we already had? And it's good work. I love the work, and I love it. I love doing it in my hometown. I love doing the work where I live. But it is a really big challenge. And so this is what we know right now in terms of federal funding. This is really a state funding town hall. But I anticipated that question, so that's.
No, it's still, I didn't see it in your revenues,
In my revenues.
in your proposed budgets, that was on the school board for like up to 2029.
The 5-year forecast, is that what you're talking about?
The last one was filed in November.
But I didn't see anything, I didn't see any revenues from federal funding at all, I only had.
The 5-year forecast only outlines the general fund, which is not the federal funds.
Okay.
Federal funds are 500 funds. They don't appear in the 5-year forecast. That's a good question.
All right, and then about, my guess, if I remember correct, is like federal funding is still only like 6 or 7% of the revenues anyway, isn't it?
It's like 4.6.
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, it's
Small.
still a lot of money.
Smaller, but
It's still
when you're
a lot
talking
of
about $2.5 million and
Right.
221,000, I mean, and you just keep adding it on. So, and we're not immune to inflation either, right?
Right.
So we're purchasing fuel for our buses, we're purchasing tires for the buses, we're, looking at our insurance, right? Our benefits. Benefits are skyrocketing. The average benefit increase, I think, in schools is between 8 and 10%. I'm on the executive committee of our insurance consortium, and I'm projecting it to be lower than that, a good bit lower than that, but it's still going up. And the other thing, when Mr. Broadwater was talking about staff increases or cost of living adjustments in terms of pay, I think the thing that we have to think about too, we have a lot of staff members that live in Loveland. So when property taxes go up, they're paying those property taxes as well. So I think that's an important kind of nuance to think about as well.
All right, we are getting close to the end, but I want to
had her hand up.
I want to get through as many questions as possible. Yeah, thank you.
I can't even believe what you all do with the limited resources you have.
Right.
That is. And this same $100 million education, or cuts to education that DeWine has proposed, is also the same budget that is going to allot the $600 million to the Cleveland Browns. And to the gentleman who was asking about these vouchers, yes, money is being shifted to these school vouchers, and the reason why that's happening is it shifts these taxpayer dollars for the vouchers, and it expands them to unaccountable, non-public, or non-chartered schools in the amount of $2.4 billion. And this is continuing to benefit the wealthiest school districts, as another county member here mentioned. But I just want to say that it is so important for everyone here to advocate for our children, especially those with disabilities. This HB 96 is going to dismantle the Fair School Funding Plan. And my question is just, how on earth do you plan to make up this deficit? I'm sure you guys are all talking about how we're going to make this work. And usually that is the tax levies or taxes on properties. But how is this proposed state budget going to impact this school district?
We're gonna stop it from doing that, because you guys are all gonna go blow up the senators and make sure that they hear the message from us. That's really, at this point, what our strategy is get the message to lawmakers and let them know that our community is paying attention and that we want to ensure the funding that we're hoping to get.
Do you have a slide with the phone number everybody should call?
They're all on the website.
It's on the lobbying website.
On lovelandschools.org/lobby.
I want to make sure we get to you. You've had your hand up for like the whole time. So yes.
I apologize, but I do want to go back to the voucher and ed choice, just so that when I am talking to my neighbors and other parents who live in the district but might use these vouchers or send their kids to other options, what can they look forward to if we don't get these? If we see reduction in our funding for the public schools, is that going to affect their busing for the private schools and these voucher students? What is their funding going to go down any if we don't get the funding that we want? How will it affect the voucher and education students?
So by law right now, we are required to bus K through 8 private school students within a 30-minute radius of the school that they would go to, or where they, where they're figuring out where they attend. And it's not 30 minutes by Google Maps, it's 30 minutes on a bus driving at the time that they would be going. So it's actually a measurement. But I can't answer necessarily what could go away, other than the fact of you can look at studies on property valuation, and it's typically tied to school districts. The school district here is the largest employer in the district, and so when you look at those employment stats, and you look at people that live here and that property valuation, it's nearly always tied. I'm actually working on a project right now to prove that, because I don't like talking in generalities. So I'm working on that right now, but I really feel like the property valuation is really tied to how well schools are doing in this community.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that's something that we've said before, is you don't find great communities with bad public school districts, and you don't find good public school districts in bad communities. They go hand in hand. It's the reason why people pick and choose where they move.
Right, but you were saying that the funding for the vouchers are commensurate with the funding for our school district?
So with the Fair School Funding Plan, but now with this House bill, the House budget that is an amendment to House Bill 96, it separates the voucher funding and like the way that the public schools are funded.
Okay, so it won't affect them?
It won't be protected, is basically what it is.
Well, I just want to make sure that if we're going to face the challenges, that they're going to face the challenges too. But is that not going to be the case?
I don't know. I don't think we have an answer.
I mean, I could dig into that more. I'll get your information and get an answer for you, but
Yeah,
it's
and
my
I would love to
understanding that
help
it
your
separates.
project to show that, that.
Excel
public
skills,
schools-
if you got some Excel skills, or
Yeah,
just to, hype me up every once in a while when
Please, by all means.
my eyes are going nuts from staring at the
All right,
spreadsheet.
we've got another question over here.
Just really a statement, anybody who's interested in writing letters, there's a group, Citizens of Loveland Schools, are meeting down at DVD, and we have some materials for you.
I'm going to throw out one last thing and say thank you for the nice words. I think we do really well with what we have, and it's because our staff works really, really hard. And we have teachers and staff members, many are in this room, that work really, really hard. I want to take solace in the fact that you saw the green check mark for the guarantee. We feel like we got some work done with our community to protect the guarantee, but now it's going to the Senate. And so the letters that would be going to legislators to try and persuade our senators not to get rid of the guarantee. The guarantee is our number one ask, and like John said earlier, we thought that was a done deal last year. We thought it was a guarantee, right? That's the name of the word. But, and so I do believe that it is helping for our community to get involved, and I appreciate all you do. So, but thank you.
I'd say one more thing. I think one of the things that's really important, I think they did a good job of focusing on this tonight, is that right now there are short-term issues and there are long-term issues. And long-term issues, you guys hinted at a lot of those tonight, and they're really frustrating. But short-term issues right now are guarantee, guarantee, guarantee. We look at what the House has proposed, we're actually essentially made whole with the funding we have right now. A little bit off, but generally we're made whole with that. So protecting what has gone from the House to the Senate is our primary short-term issue right now that we want to put all of the effort into that we can over these next couple of months. Long-term, yeah, we got to look at all of those things to make sure education has its proper place in the state priorities. That includes, election issues. We got to think about that as we elect our leaders, who are leaders that care about our schools, and make sure we're prioritizing those leaders as we're asking those hard questions. But those are long-term issues. Short-term wise, the vouchers are going nowhere. Our legislators have made that very clear, and with the supermajority, there's just no chance of changing that. That's why we're trying not to focus a lot on that. We're saying right now here in Loveland, the main thing that's going to help us is protecting the guarantee and trying to get that formula continued to be a part of the conversation as we move forward for school funding. So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate your partnership. I know that all of the other board members are very appreciative of the fact that we've got a community and not just us out there concerned about these things. We have a whole community that wants to work together, and we appreciate all of the support that you're giving this district and our kids so that we can give them all the funding they need.
And I'll take one more minute to say, we've tried to make this as easy as possible for you guys to take action. This is the website, lovelandschools.org/lobby. It's got a lot of the information we covered here tonight. It's got the flyer on there. And right over here is a list of all of our legislators. You can pull it up on your phone. You can click to call them. You can leave them, send them a voicemail, send them an email. There's instructions here. Keep it kid focused. Tell your story. Let them know who you are, and let them hear from you. And let them hear from you again and again between now and the end of June, because we can't let our foot off the gas.
And I would also suggest if you're emailing, attach that flyer. It has information. It definitely got people's attention last time. I actually had a friend send me the flyer and say, this district really has it together. And I was like, hey, I know. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Any last final questions? Yes.
Just concentrate on senators, Ohio senators.
It's moved out of the House. So yes, focus on the Senate. That list is actually updated with the senators up towards the top now, and it kind of, on the spreadsheet, it gives you kind of timetable ideas, but copy and paste the email addresses, CC them all, and get it to them.
You could also thank the House folks that have passed what's already
Yeah.
come, because again, this will eventually come back to committee, so we want the House folks to feel really good about what they had, so they fight for that in the long term with the Senate.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
So can you advocate, I know you said that you wish that they would evaluate each school by how well they do with the money.
We would love for it to be on an individual
But they
basis.
would never do that, would they?
I know. Not to be blunt, but no.
Performance part of the formula?
What's that?
Is the performance?
No, performance is not. The other part that's not part of it is how much business you have in a community, and that hurts us too, because other districts that have a lot of business get more money, and it's not really in the formula.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to say thank you all for coming out here. I am so excited that we were able to give you guys this information and kind of give you marching orders. I hope that you can get on board with it, and I think together we can make a difference. So thank you guys for coming out tonight.
Good, how's everything?